Autumn 1943, deep within occupied France. A young woman hidden in the dense undergrowth meticulously set her device. German war machines depended on these rails, but tonight a single audacious act would ignite a chain reaction. Her ingenious method, dismissed as impossible, was about to shatter enemy logistics and spark a flicker of hope across a subjugated nation. To understand how it happened, we must go back to the grim reality of occupied France. By 1943, the German grip on the nation was absolute, a suffocating blanket of control that extended into every facet of daily life. Yet, beneath this oppressive surface, a fierce spirit of resistance simmered, fueled by a deep-seated patriotism and an unyielding desire for freedom. The German Wehrmacht, the mighty war machine that had swept across Europe, relied heavily on an intricate network of railways. These steel arteries were the lifeblood of their occupation, transporting troops, heavy armaments, vital ammunition, precious fuel, and countless other supplies from the industrial heartlands of Germany to the fortified Atlantic Wall in the west and the brutal battlefields of the Eastern Front. These lines were not merely infrastructure, they were the very veins through which the Nazi war effort flowed, their importance paramount to Hitler's strategic objectives. For the nascent and often outgunned French resistance, disrupting these supply lines became more than just an act of defiance. It was a strategic imperative, a way to fight back against an enemy that seemed invincible. Every derailed train, every delayed shipment, every moment of confusion inflicted upon the occupiers was a small but significant victory against an overwhelming force, chipping away at their perceived invincibility. The region around Dijon, a historic city nestled in the heart of Burgundy, became a critical nexus for German logistical operations. Its geographical position made it an unavoidable crossroads for multiple railway lines converging from various directions, carrying everything from panzer tanks and heavy artillery pieces to crates of medical supplies and food rations. German patrols were constant and ubiquitous, their security measures sophisticated and brutal, making any direct assault on the tracks incredibly dangerous. Local resistance cells, though brimming with courage and determination, found their efforts often thwarted by the sheer scale of German vigilance and the efficiency of their repair crews. Simple track cuts, though easy to execute, were quickly repaired, often within hours, by German engineers who forced French civilians to labor at gunpoint. Explosives were scarce, a precious commodity smuggled at immense risk, and large-scale operations required a level of coordination and resources that was difficult to maintain under constant surveillance and the ever-present threat of betrayal. The German response to sabotage was swift and merciless, with innocent civilians often paying the ultimate price in brutal reprisals, creating a chilling deterrent. This created a profound dilemma for the resistance: how to strike effectively, how to inflict lasting damage without inviting catastrophic retaliation that would undermine public support and decimate their ranks, how to make a significant strategic impact with limited means and minimal risk to their own people. The answer, they slowly began to realize, lay not in brute force, but in a subtle, almost invisible form of disruption. It required a mind that could see beyond conventional methods, someone who understood the intricate mechanics of the railway, the predictable rhythm of the trains, and the often arrogant psychology of the enemy. It needed a new approach, a way to turn the enemy's strength, their reliance on efficient rail transport, into its greatest weakness. The resistance leadership, desperate for a breakthrough that could truly cripple the occupation, began to consider unconventional proposals, even those that seemed utterly improbable at first glance. Among the quiet, determined members of a local resistance cell operating in the shadow of Dijon was a young woman named Marie Leclerc. Barely 20 years old, Marie possessed an unassuming demeanor, a quiet grace that belied a sharp, incisive intellect and an unyielding spirit forged in the crucible of occupation. She wasn't a fighter in the traditional sense, one who wielded a rifle or engaged in direct combat. Her strength lay not in physical prowess, but in her keen observation skills, her analytical mind, and her profound understanding of complex systems. Before the war, Marie had been a brilliant engineering student at a prestigious university. her mind captivated by the intricate mechanics of the railway lines that crisscrossed her beloved homeland. She had spent countless hours watching trains, not just as a casual observer, but as a meticulous student studying their schedules, understanding the immense stresses placed upon the tracks, and identifying the inherent vulnerabilities within the vast network. The brutal occupation had shattered her academic dreams, forcing her studies to an abrupt halt, but it had ignited a different, more urgent kind of purpose. Witnessing the systematic plunder of her country, the casual cruelty of the occupying forces, and the daily humiliation of her people had hardened her resolve into an unshakable determination. She joined the resistance, initially assisting with vital communications, hiding Allied airmen shot down over France, and distributing clandestine newspapers that kept the flame of hope alive. Yet, her mind constantly sought a more impactful way to fight, a method that could truly strike at the heart of the German war effort. She firmly believed that the Germans, with all their military might and technological superiority, had overlooked the subtle weaknesses inherent in their own logistical efficiency, weaknesses that could be exploited by a clever and determined adversary. Marie Leclerc's childhood was deeply steeped in the rhythm and romance of the railway. Her father, a respected and experienced railway engineer, had instilled in her a profound appreciation for the precision, power, and intricate beauty of the vast network of steel tracks that crisscrossed France. From an early age, she often accompanied him on his inspections of the lines, learning about the critical importance of track gauges, the complex signal systems that govern train movements, and the immense forces at play when a heavy locomotive thundered down the line at speed. She absorbed every detail with an insatiable curiosity, her keen mind dissecting the mechanics of switches, the resilience of steel under pressure, and the critical points of stress in the track infrastructure. This informal, hands-on education, combined with her formal studies in engineering before the war, gave her a unique and invaluable perspective. When the German war machine swept through France in 1940, Marie's world, like that of so many others, crumbled into chaos. Her university closed. Her father was forced to continue his work under the harsh scrutiny of the occupation, and the familiar, comforting trains now bore the ominous symbols of oppression, carrying German soldiers and stolen resources. The sight of German supply trains laden with goods plundered from her country fueled a quiet but burning rage within her. She saw them not just as trains, but as instruments of subjugation, each car a stark testament to France's stolen sovereignty and the suffering of its people. Her initial involvement with the resistance was cautious, born out of a desperate necessity and a burning desire to contribute meaningfully to the struggle. She started by relaying coded messages, providing safe houses for Allied airmen, and distributing clandestine newspapers that served as a lifeline of truth in a world of Nazi propaganda. These tasks, though vital for maintaining morale and intelligence networks, left Marie with a gnawing frustration. She wanted to strike a more direct and impactful blow at the heart of the German war effort, to inflict damage that truly mattered, that could be felt on the front lines. She observed the resistance's early attempts at sabotage, small explosions that damaged a few meters of track, minor disruptions that were often quickly repaired. The Germans, with their vast resources and engineering prowess, would simply reroute trains or deploy their repair crews with ruthless efficiency, often forcing French civilians to assist at gunpoint, restoring the lines within hours. The impact of these efforts was fleeting, the risks immense, and the strategic gains minimal. Marie realized that a fundamentally different approach was needed, one that exploited the very nature of the railway system itself, rather than merely attacking its surface with conventional explosives. She began to sketch diagrams in secret, filling notebooks with complex calculations and daring theories, exploring how a small, precisely applied force could unleash disproportionate destruction. She sought to understand how to create a chain reaction, a domino effect that would turn the train's own momentum and weight against itself. The resistance cell Marie belonged to, like many others across occupied France, struggled with the sheer scale and overwhelming power of the German occupation. Their acts of defiance, though undeniably brave, often felt like mere pinpricks against a colossal, unfeeling giant. They had attempted several train sabotages, each meticulously planned and executed with immense personal risk, yet none had achieved the desired strategic impact. One particularly harrowing night, a team had managed to place a substantial charge beneath a section of track. The resulting explosion was deafening, tearing a crater in the earth and twisting the steel rails into grotesque, unusable shapes. However, the Germans, anticipating such attacks, had highly efficient repair crews on standby, often stationed strategically along key routes. Within a day, the line was operational again, albeit with a temporary speed restriction, minimizing the disruption. The cost, however, had been tragically high. 2 resistance members were captured in the subsequent German sweep, their fates grim and their sacrifice seemingly in vain. Marie studied these failures with a detached, analytical eye, devoid of emotional judgment. She concluded that it wasn't a lack of courage or skill on the part of her comrades, but a fundamental misunderstanding of the target and the enemy's capabilities. The Germans had anticipated and prepared for brute force, for large explosions and obvious visible damage. What they hadn't prepared for was subtlety, for a method that didn't just break the track in a straightforward manner, but fundamentally compromised its structural integrity in a way that was difficult to detect, even harder to quickly rectify, and almost impossible to attribute to external sabotage at first glance. She spent weeks observing German repair crews, noting their methods, their weaknesses, and the types of damage they could most easily mitigate. Her mind, trained in the rigorous discipline of engineering, began to formulate a daring theory. Instead of attempting to utterly destroy a section of track with a massive explosion, what if one could induce a catastrophic failure by targeting a specific, often overlooked, structural vulnerability within the rail system itself? This would require a different kind of explosive, a different kind of placement, and a different kind of timing, a method that would turn the train's own destructive power against itself. The idea, when it fully formed in Marie's brilliant mind, seemed almost too simple, too elegant, too audacious to be truly effective. She proposed it to her cell leader, a grizzled veteran named Henri, whose face was etched with the weariness of years of underground struggle. Henri, a man of action and direct confrontation, initially dismissed it as insane, a fanciful notion from a young woman who had not yet seen the true brutality of war. "We need bigger bombs, Marie, not clever theories," he'd grumbled, his voice heavy with skepticism. But Marie, with quiet persistence and unwavering conviction, laid out her meticulous calculations, explaining in precise detail how a small, precisely placed charge, rather than a large, indiscriminate one, could leverage the immense weight, speed, and kinetic energy of a German supply train against itself. She argued passionately that the goal wasn't a spectacular explosion that would draw immediate attention, but a devastating, prolonged derailment that would block the line for days, not mere hours, causing maximum logistical disruption. Henri, though still deeply skeptical, was a pragmatic man. He saw the undeniable logic in her meticulous planning, the potential for a breakthrough, and the desperate need for a new, more effective approach. With a heavy sigh and a reluctant nod, he agreed to let her try, granting her a small amount of precious plastique and a single critical opportunity to prove her theory. The challenge of sabotaging German supply trains was multifaceted, extending far beyond the immediate danger of discovery. Beyond the constant patrols, the ever-present threat of immediate execution, and the brutal reprisals against civilians, the resistance faced a logistical nightmare. Explosives were rare, often smuggled at great risk across borders or stolen from German stockpiles, and had to be used with maximum efficiency and strategic impact. A simple explosion might damage a few meters of track, creating a temporary inconvenience, but German engineers were notoriously adept at rapid repairs, often forcing local populations to labor at gunpoint, restoring functionality within hours. The goal was not just to create a bang, a fleeting moment of disruption, but to cause a prolonged, debilitating disruption, to create a bottleneck that would starve the German front lines of vital supplies for an extended period. This meant targeting the train itself, or causing a derailment so severe, so complex in its wreckage, that clearing the line would take days, if not weeks, not mere hours. The rules of engagement for saboteurs were unwritten, but deeply understood within the resistance. Strike hard, disappear without a trace, and minimize civilian casualties at all costs. Marie's plan had to adhere strictly to these principles. Her trick was designed to be subtle, to avoid a massive attention-grabbing explosion that would immediately alert patrols and trigger widespread searches. Instead, it aimed for a delayed, cascading failure, a chain reaction that would make it harder for the Germans to pinpoint the exact cause or even determine if it was sabotage at all, at least in the immediate aftermath. This element of confusion and ambiguity was crucial. It bought precious time for subsequent operations, allowed the resistance members to escape, and most importantly, prevented immediate, widespread and brutal reprisals against the local populace. The railway line near Dijon, with its heavy traffic, its strategic importance as a hub, and its relatively isolated sections, offered the perfect, albeit incredibly dangerous, proving ground for her audacious theory. It was here, in the heart of occupied France, that Marie would put her intellect and courage to the ultimate test. Under the cloak of a moonless night, the kind that swallows all light and sound, Marie and two trusted resistance comrades, Jean and Sylvie, approached the chosen section of track. The air was cold, carrying the damp scent of earth, decaying leaves, and the distant, faint aroma of wood smoke from unseen farmhouses. Marie's heart pounded a frantic, insistent drumbeat against the silence of the countryside, a stark counterpoint to the quiet determination in her eyes. This was no longer a theoretical exercise confined to her notebooks. This was real, with lives, and the fate of countless others, hanging precariously in the balance. She carried a small canvas satchel containing her carefully prepared device, a compact charge of plastique, no larger than a bar of soap, a specialized pressure-sensitive detonator, and a timer meticulously calibrated for precision. Jean and Sylvie maintained a vigilant watch, their rifles ready, their eyes scanning the dark for any telltale sign of German patrols, their senses heightened by the immense tension of the moment. Marie knelt beside the cold, unyielding steel rail, her movements precise, almost ritualistic, honed by countless hours of mental rehearsal. She ignored the slight tremor in her hands, a natural reaction to the immense pressure, focusing solely on the intricate task before her. The target was a specific rail joint, a point she had identified through her exhaustive studies as inherently vulnerable under immense dynamic stress. Her trick relied on exploiting this weakness, not with overwhelming brute force, but with surgical precision, a small but perfectly applied force at the exact moment of maximum vulnerability. The distant rumble of an approaching train began to grow, a low resonant thrum that vibrated through the very ground beneath them, signaling the imminent arrival of a German supply convoy. This was her moment, the culmination of weeks of planning and years of observation. She had calculated every variable with meticulous care: the train's estimated speed, the immense weight of its cargo, the exact point of impact where the device would exert its force. With a final deep breath, a silent prayer for her homeland, she activated the timer, securing the device to the rail with practiced, almost invisible efficiency. The fate of the convoy, and perhaps the course of the resistance, now rested on her ingenious design and the unforgiving physics of steel, speed, and immense kinetic energy. The German supply train, a long, dark serpent of heavy freight cars pulled by a powerful, smoke-belching locomotive, thundered down the tracks. It was laden with critical war materiel, crates of artillery shells, barrels of aviation fuel, and perhaps even components for new V-weapons, a vital shipment destined for the front lines where the fate of the war hung in the balance. As the massive engine, a symbol of German industrial might, passed over Marie's precisely placed device, a subtle, almost imperceptible shift occurred. The small charge, designed not for a grand explosive detonation, but for a focused directional force, momentarily compromised the integrity of the rail joint. It wasn't a complete break, not a gaping hole in the track, but a critical weakening, a minute displacement that would prove catastrophic for the following cars. The locomotive, with its immense weight distributed over many axles, passed safely, its momentum carrying it forward, But the following cars, particularly the heavy, rigid freight wagons, struck the now vulnerable point with devastating force. The first few cars lurched violently, their wheels grinding against the misaligned rail with a horrifying screech of metal. Then, with a deafening shriek of tortured steel, splintering wood and tearing rivets, the coupling snapped with a report like a cannon. Car after car began to pile up, their immense momentum transforming them into a twisted, grotesque sculpture of mangled steel and scattered cargo. Fuel tanks ruptured under the crushing weight, spilling their highly flammable contents across the wreckage. Crates of ammunition burst open, their deadly contents scattering across the embankment, some detonating in small, sharp explosions, the air filled with the acrid smell of burning oil, the metallic tang of destruction, and the choking dust of pulverized ballast. There was no single massive explosion that would immediately alert distant patrols, but a terrifying series of violent impacts, a symphony of destruction orchestrated by Marie's clever design. The train, once a proud symbol of German efficiency and power, was now a mangled, burning heap, its cargo scattered and destroyed, its path blocked for the foreseeable future. Marie, John, and Sylvie watched from a safe distance, concealed within the dense tree line as the chaos unfolded. The sounds of the wreck echoed through the valley, a terrifying but triumphant testament to their success. Within minutes, the first German emergency flares arced into the night sky, followed by the frantic shouts of disoriented soldiers, their commands lost in the rising cacophony of secondary explosions and burning wreckage. But by then, the resistance team was already melting back into the shadows, their mission accomplished, leaving behind a scene of utter devastation and a clear, undeniable message. The resistance had found a new, devastating way to fight, a weapon of intellect and precision. Over the next 6 weeks, Marie Leclerc's bomb trick became a terrifying and bewildering enigma for the German occupation forces. 23 German supply trains met a similar catastrophic fate along the critical railway lines of eastern France. Each incident followed a chillingly consistent pattern, a sudden catastrophic derailment, often without the telltale signs of a large conventional explosion, followed by a massive pile-up of cars, rendering the line impassable for days, sometimes even weeks. The Germans were utterly baffled. Their engineers meticulously inspected the tracks, searching for large craters or obvious crude sabotage, but often found only subtle, almost invisible damage to rail joints, almost as if the trains had simply torn themselves apart under their own weight and speed. This ambiguity, this inability to pinpoint a clear cause, was a crucial part of Marie's genius. It sowed confusion, delayed effective countermeasures, and made it difficult for them to adapt their security protocols. The impact on German logistics was profound and immediate. Fuel, desperately needed for tanks and aircraft, ammunition for their infantry, and troop reinforcements destined for the front lines were severely delayed, rerouted inefficiently, or never arrived at all. Morale among German railway personnel plummeted, replaced by a growing sense of unease, vulnerability, and even superstition. Commanders raged, demanding explanations and increased security, but the elusive nature of the attacks made prevention incredibly difficult. For the French resistance, Marie's success was a monumental boost, a powerful symbol of hope and effective resistance. Her cell, once struggling for significant impact, now became a beacon of ingenuity and defiance. The news of the phantom derailments spread like wildfire through clandestine networks, inspiring other cells to adopt similar methods and demonstrating that even against overwhelming odds, intellect and ingenuity could turn the tide. Each destroyed train was a tangible blow against the oppressor, a clear sign that France was fighting back, one audacious and brilliant act at a time. Marie Leclerc's actions, though perhaps unknown to the broader public during the war, represented a critical and sophisticated shift in resistance tactics. Her bomb trick moved beyond simple acts of defiance and localized destruction to a highly sophisticated form of strategic sabotage. By focusing on prolonged disruption rather than mere instantaneous destruction, she maximized the operational impact of incredibly limited resources. The consistent crippling of German supply lines in a vital region like Dijon had far-reaching consequences across the entire Western Front. It forced the Wehrmacht to divert significant resources, thousands of troops, highly skilled engineers, and precious equipment, away from combat duties to guard and repair railway infrastructure. This stretched their already strained manpower, diverted critical materials, and severely delayed crucial movements of men and materiel, impacting their ability to reinforce and resupply their fighting forces. Such acts of persistent, effective sabotage were instrumental in systematically weakening the German war machine from within, complementing the strategic bombing campaigns of Allied air forces targeting industrial centers and transportation hubs. They created a pervasive climate of uncertainty and fear among the occupying forces, forcing them to constantly look over their shoulders, to question every shadow, and to doubt the security of their own infrastructure. More importantly, these widespread disruptions played a vital, often underestimated role in preparing the ground for the eventual Allied invasion. By systematically degrading German logistical capabilities, the resistance ensured that when D-Day finally arrived, the enemy would be less prepared, less supplied, and significantly less able to respond effectively to the massive amphibious assault. Marie's ingenuity, replicated by others who learned her methods through clandestine channels, contributed directly and profoundly to the strategic weakening of the Third Reich's iron grip on Western Europe. With the eventual liberation of France, Marie Leclerc, like countless other unsung heroes of the resistance, quietly faded back into civilian life. Her extraordinary contribution, the insane bomb trick that crippled German supply lines and sowed chaos among the occupiers, remained largely unheralded, a secret shared only among her closest comrades and the highest echelons of the resistance leadership. The immense chaos of post-war reconstruction, the collective desire for normalcy after years of brutal occupation, and the inherent secrecy of underground operations meant that many such individual acts of heroism were never fully documented, publicly recognized, or widely celebrated. Marie likely returned to her studies, perhaps even pursuing her engineering dreams with renewed vigor, carrying with her the quiet, profound satisfaction of knowing the immense impact she had made on the liberation of her country. Her story, though not widely known, became a whispered legend within the resistance, a powerful testament to the enduring power of a single, determined individual to alter the course of history through sheer intellect, unwavering courage, and an unshakable belief in freedom. This is the true legacy of Marie Leclerc and the countless unsung heroes of the French resistance. It is proof that even in the darkest times, even when everything seems lost, even when the whole world tells you that you are defeated, a few determined individuals can change history. One ingenious trick at a time, one shattered supply line at a time. And in doing so, prove that the human spirit, when tempered by suffering and ignited by righteous anger, is stronger than any propaganda, stronger than any numerical superiority, stronger than any war machine. They remind us that true strength does not come from the number of guns or the size of an army. It comes from what you are fighting for and why you refuse to surrender. And sometimes, just sometimes, that's enough to change the world.